in the film with Chief Phil Lane, he makes mention of a belief that he has that all of our society has to collectively bottom out now. We've had instances of it starting to happen. In 2008 we had the bubble burst on Wall Street, and we've since had other occasions where things are seeming to bottom out. But we haven't bottomed out all the way. And he feels that just like a person has to bottom out if, for example, you have an addiction, alcohol or gambling or drugs or whatever it happens to be, materialism, he says we're all addicts now. And we're addicts with just about everything, that we have to lose that addiction, and the only way to do that is through a spiritual connection. And Jung and Freud, Mark, you may remember this, during the early days of Alcoholics Anonymous, said too, when Bill W. was trying to find a way to help people who were alcoholic addicts, that Jung said you must have a belief in God or spiritual factor if you're going to address this addiction. Otherwise you just never get it. So in keeping with what Challenge was trying to bring to a secular audience of some, did you say 330,000 people a week?
300,000.
300,000 a week for 14 years.
14 years, yeah.
And those are the Komo-TV numbers.
That's right.
Yeah. What an immense success story. Because 300,000 in Seattle at that time, how many people could there have even been living in Seattle in 1960? I came in 69, so the population couldn't have been much more than, what, 500,000, 600,000, if that? Doesn't seem like it.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So it was really the program of the week on a Sunday night at 6 o'clock, and was the water cooler issue of the day following, whether it was Who Killed Christ or any of the issues that you covered over all of those years. This was a wonderful grounding that's probably not been done in television since. And the amount of reality religious programming that's been on TV is pretty sparse when you look at it. There was the Lutheran Hour during those same years that Mutual of Omaha sponsored. By the way, they would never give a sponsor to your program, even though sponsors wanted to sponsor.
No sponsors, no.
Yeah, but Fisher Broadcasting would never accept a sponsor, which was interesting. So I think we have enough that we can look at through the story of Challenge, and then the continuation of Challenge, which is your dream and Father Levine's dream here at Camp Brotherhood, that really was what you wanted to spring from the first Challenge. And maybe you can just say a few words about that, how the sharing of ideas through television sort of somehow transformed itself into this marvelous retreat that you've created here.
Well, I'd like to give a background on how we got started. It began, I would say, in a small way at a Rotary luncheon in Seattle between Mr. Warren, the manager of Komo, and Rabbi Levine, who was senior rabbi at the big Jewish temple de Hirsch in Seattle. It was a time when Kennedy was seeking to be president. Efforts being made to defeat him on the basis of his religion. He was elected Catholic, he'd be taking suggestions from the Pope, he'd be subsidizing Catholic institutions, and so America was in danger. But they got talking. Mr. Warren was not a Catholic, but he figured, as Rabbi did, that using religion to divide people was the opposite of what religion was all about. So as they continued talking about it, the separation of church and state, freedom of religion, conscience, and so on, Mr. Warren said to the rabbi, if you can get a Catholic priest and a Protestant pastor to discuss these issues on television, I'll give you a half-hour free time on Sunday nights. So So the rabbi went to the Catholic Archbishop, see if he could get a priest. He turned him down. He thought it'd be just more tail thumping and so on. So he went back a few weeks later with a bunch of literature he got saying why you shouldn't vote for a Catholic. And he said, don't you think you should answer these questions for your people? And he said, I'll think about it. A few days later, I was working in his office. He tapped me and said, Rabbi Levine has some idea for a TV program. You're my representative on it. Go work with him. That's the only preparation I had for it. It wasn't particularly something I was personally interested in at the time. I've been a Catholic priest, I think, for almost 20 years. Anyhow, I met with the rabbi. I was selected Protestant pastor. And the first program began about October of 1960. And the station figured, as time went on, they had about 300,000 people watching it in Western Washington, Vancouver, Canada, and Victoria, Canada. We had a large audience there. And we perhaps stepped in where angels feared to walk after the first year by attempting a program, Who Crucified Christ? And there's an award here in my office that we received from the National Conference of Christians and Jews, approving of what we did. And in 1961, that was a remarkable event. For me, what I took part in with the rabbi was a part of a new revolution, a religious revolution. Up to that time, as you indicated, Neil, Catholics and Jews didn't dialogue with each other. This is one of the first times in a respectful way we sat down and listened to each other. But that's happening not just between Christians and Jews, it's happening between the major religions. They begin to speak to each other. They begin to find what they have in common and to see how they can use those common insights for the good of society. And that's what we felt we did. I think that the programs we did helped to draw people together in dialogue and not just writing each other off. For example, to say some of the best part of our program took place on Monday morning when people were driving to work in cars together and discussing what the rabbi said, what the priest said. We initiated a discussion between people and religion. Up to that time, you didn't talk about religion or politics. We kind of broke down that barrier. So today, 60 years later, we're in a similar position. Religions are beginning to talk to each other, but there's much misunderstanding between many people. So programs such as ours did a lot. I received a letter from the Archbishop of Vancouver, Canada, thanking me for what we did in Canada, just on the TV program, in helping people to dialogue and come to better understanding with each other. So the same thing is true today. We have Hindus, Muslims, Buddhists, and so on, will begin to talk to each other. But it will be, for example, we're in a few weeks from now, 29th of September, we'll be hosting a meeting of people from India, from South Africa, from Denmark, from France, from Ireland, and the United States, in a dialogue among religions. To see what do we have in common? How can we use those for the betterment of society? To end violence, to end 30,000 people dying each day of starvation in our world. How we can avoid trafficking in women and children. So many issues have to be faced. And for the first time, religions, instead of doing their own thing in their own particular area, are now talking about working together. They're not trying to prove one is better than the other or anything. And to me, that's one of the great revolutions. I figured it was a revolution in 1945, when the nations of the world came together in the United Nations, see how it could work more fully together. And what's happening now is a revolution of religions. And I think what we did for the 14 years I was on television with the rabbi and 4 different Protestant pastors, it was a pattern of what could be done. And I think there's an opportunity being missed in the communications today in not getting a similar program going that would involve the ones we never thought of at the time. Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims, dialoguing with each other. So that's my wish. And what we're doing here at this Interfaith Center, as I said, is trying to bring people together. The State Department has brought people from these countries over here, from Pakistan, Afghanistan, Morocco, Iraq. See how we have a race and religion. In this very building where we're sitting, the library, we had a delegation from Pakistan here, led by a very interested fellow, loved America, but hesitant to leave here. When he went back to Pakistan, 2 men came supposedly to welcome him home and shot him dead in his house for coming to America. So you see the memorial outside the library here. So that's the attitude we want to change. And it can be done in various ways, but we figure honest discussion before people, it would be an effective way. At least that was proven, in my estimation, in the 14 years I was on television, that in fact it ended because so many other groups wanted to get on it, the speakers, get the publicity. So that's my viewpoint of the challenge, how it got started, what the vision was, and the vision is still alive very much here at this center. Rabbi bought this farm, 300 acres in 1966, and I joined them with the help of friends to be a home for the human family. Well, the religions at that time were centered on themselves, and they were afraid to dialogue and move on to the other ones. Because the rabbi's vision was to rent 5 acres to Baptists, Lutherans, Presbyterians, so on, Jews, put up their own building, indoctrinate with their own beliefs, but have an opportunity to have meals, have sports, have a library with others. So I was, after we bought the place, we didn't do a pre-marketing study. I went to the heads of the different churches. Same answer for every single one. It's a great idea, but we can't afford to embark on this program at this time. So we're slowly, even to hopefully at this time, begin to change that outlook. Where we're going to offer programs for young people to different churches here with a speaker. We're offering programs for married couples, whatever their religion are. Because we feel that it's no longer a boundary between people. They're open to share with each other their insights. Does that help to take
Absolutely, absolutely. And I must say, and as I looked around the library today when I came, where there are sort of equal portions of your past and Rabbi Levine's past, he's still very much alive in your actions in carrying forward the work, and you do so with such a spry step. We hope God gives you grace to continue that forever. Against that backdrop, I agree with you that there is the opportunity for the ready-made armies of God. If they could get on the right side of God's view of the world, the way God would like us to conduct ourselves, not in the kill, murder, die sense, but in the create, culture, and collaborate sense, we could do great things, and it may be the trump card that we have remaining to save this whole thing.
Well, another way we're trying to implement this viewpoint, we have a chapel up here on the grounds here, interdenominational chapel, of course, but we're building a memorial garden right next to it. And in it, we're going to put some quotations from the various religions. For example, we might have the Buddhist one, let God be God, or let us try to do God's work by eliminating needless suffering from the world. We're going to put these there so people can see the religions exposed with their beliefs side by side.
Yes.
And that's a continuation of the vision that we had at Camp Brotherhood. It'd be a meditation center based on the way we can show respect to the different religions.
Yes. Well, how do you see in future the challenge, really a movement, as you described it, back in the 60s and through the mid-70s, being reinvigorated and reinstated as something that's going to get interfaith dialogue going again?
Well, I think particularly young people, are going to have a vision. There's a statue of St. Francis out there in front of our main house. There's a very interesting story. A gentleman, Floyd Smough, is a professor of architecture at the forestry at the University of Washington. World War I, he was a conscientious objector. World War II, of course, he wasn't drafted. But when the bomb was dropped in Hiroshima, he was so sad that he collected all the money he could from his friends and went over and started building homes for the Japanese out of the rubble. So a group of young grade school students came to him one day and said, Mr. Smough, why are you different to the Americans that bombed us and left us here? You're trying to build homes for us. He said to them, the editor of the school paper had asked him a question, he said, I don't believe war is the way for human beings to solve problems. War is, as the Dalai Lama says, is antique. It's passé. So 40 years later, he was invited back to Hiroshima for the anniversary of the dropping of the bomb. And there was a dinner that night. He was the only American invited back, and there was some VIPs at the head table. And one of them said to him, "Mr. Smoot, do you remember when you were trying to build homes for us and how you took victims of the bomb to Seattle for treatment? That we asked you why you're different to the Americans." And this gentleman said, "I remember your answer very well." He said, "War is not the way for human beings to solve problems." And he was a grade school kid at the time. He kept that thought in his mind. He went on and he said, "Today I am the representative of Hiroshima in the Japanese Parliament, and I'm the advisor to the Prime Minister for disarmament." So that's why I say, young people, if we reach them with the right way, with commitment or believe in ourselves in it, as Floyd Smoot did, that's the hope for peace in the world.
Yes, yes. I remember during the activism years of Ground Zero, you recall, and Archbishop Hunthausen's marches out at the nuclear base, which I participated in. I brought an exhibit of paintings and hand drawings from the survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yeah.
And we had them down at the Traver Gallery downtown. And when people would walk by those and see those horrific drawings that the victims themselves had made, it was such a deep and touching moment. That this is something that I think even today we still hold in denial, don't you? That we split the soul of America.
Floyd was a wonderful gentleman for peace. He worked in Korea. He helped the Japanese, a number of other places. He was nominated 2 or 3 times for the Nobel Peace Prize. So on the occasion of the 40th anniversary of the dropping of the bomb, they honored him by giving him a check for $40,000 because he brought so many over for treatment here. He came back and went down to the mayor of Seattle and he said, "I want you to match this money by having a peace park in Seattle." So the mayor took him up, I forget which one it was at the time. So they bought 3 blocks near the University Bridge and they cleared it out and planted trees from various countries where Floyd had worked. And they had on a statue of a Japanese girl releasing a peace symbol. And all the students near the University of Washington walked by that peace park. So this is how we get the message for peace out against war, violence. Not just poison gas, which should be out, but anything that kills human beings is wrong.
Right. When you think about the possibilities of today re-enjoining your vision, your original vision with Rabbi Levine and actually doing it, well, during those years I was in Oslo making films about East-West students at the height of the Cold War, swapping places and playing each other's stereotyped roles. I believe we just talked about that. Do you see any opportunities now, either locally or internationally, to do this again?
The harvest is ripe.
The harvest is ripe.
I've seen many people come here, Neil, and thank me and say, "We're so grateful you established this place. It's a vision, it's a light in darkness. It's a home for the whole human family." And this is true. We brought Protestants and Catholics from Belfast, Northern Ireland to sit down and talk with each other. Came to the conclusion you almost have to get them as pre-teens. We have a pre-teen group scheduled for next August. Palestinians, Israelis and Christians.
Wonderful.
So this comes from the vision of what we did, and the conviction, I believe, as I said, the harvest is ripe for this. It's just a question of somebody will have the vision Mr. Warren had at Komo. That's why this building, main building here, is named after him. He gave that half hour, otherwise you wouldn't be here today. He gave that half hour on TV that started this revolution going on. And so I hope that Al Jazeera or somebody else with a vision will take up that same idea to promote peace and unity in the human family. I just received a letter from the Southern Poverty Law Center that I support. It says there's 11 violent groups in this state. I think there's 24,000 in America altogether. So our work is cut out for us. You can't sit back and say things are right. We have to work for peace, respect for human life in our society. And that's what religions is its prime job to do.
Yes. Do you see any way, because this is something I've worked on in my own work in my writings, to find a way to get the churches and the synagogues and the temples to reorganize their troops, their armies, their congregations into active rather than passive groups on these issues?
Well, I do. I think my personal hope is based on the new Pope we have, Pope Francis.
Yes.
He says dialogue, dialogue, dialogue is the key to it. And he said, get out among the sheep and smell like the sheep. So we get involved in human affairs and the thing. So I see this as a movement of the religions together to go back and examine as a Christian what the role of Jesus was disliked, how people relate to each other, kindness, compassion. And the Pope has said that, don't be so intellectual about theorizing about faith. Go out and see who the guys lying on the roadside today that need help.
Yes.
To our elderly people or young people neglected. I watched a fellow on television last night telling about the miserable home life he had, and nobody reached out to help him. He eventually got so angry he shot his parents. So these are the things that religion have to be concerned about.
Yes.
Not the more theorizing about who's right or who's wrong, who's got a better theory, but say, how to relate to human beings who we're living with here and now.
Right. There is, I believe, that one God above all gods, the Creator God, that we're all really trying to find, trying to serve, and somehow religion has gotten in the way and obfuscated.
Religion has been divided in a way, but that's why I say there's a revolution taking place in religion.
Yes.
I think Pope John said about tyranny, communism, he said you always must distinguish between the country and its regime and the people evolving in that regime. That there's something in the human heart that reaches out for love and peace and compassion.
Yes.
And that's, religion has to urge and nurture that thought. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, at the Boston disaster, the bombing there, so many people rushed in. First responders at the risk of their lives. This shows that in the human heart there is this desire for helping another person. Mm-hmm. And this is the essence of religion.
Yes. And it seems to me that in the Occupy and the Arab Spring movements, that you see people suddenly losing their fear. They've lost their fear of the dictators and kings that ruled them.
Sure. And
they're just not willing to be feudal slaves anymore. And whatever it takes, they're going to do. You know, it is that thing within the human heart that says,
you take fear away
born
from
free.
Fear is useless, Jesus said. What's needed is trust. And so I feel so bad that we're building another nuclear center or a bigger nuclear bomb in Missouri. Mm-hmm. That's submitting to fear. Yes. But somebody has to come and start and say, nuclear war. We did that with gas after World War I. We need some of that mentality today about nuclear weapons.
Well, you mentioned this new trend we're seeing in the media, where our own media has gotten sort of useless, hasn't it, with all the noise and people shouting back and forth from both sides and nothing getting done in Congress and so forth. But the new media, with Al Jazeera stepping up to the plate and with Al Jazeera America now, are really bringing the news again, like the old CBS News or the CNN News of Ted Turner.
Religion, the media has to take religion more seriously and study what it's all about. Somebody said about an atheist who rejected God and religion, and the fellow said to me, that's the God I reject too. So we have to go back and find out who is God, where's religion today. It come from a dark period in the past where we fought each other, like the 30 Years War from 1618 to 1648. We excommunicated one another. We forgot that God has called us to be one family, and to help each other as if we were family members. Yes. That's true religion to me. And if the media can catch that idea and see where it's being done and give insights into where compassion is used. For instance, the other night, there's a program on 60 Minutes about mercy ship in Africa, mm-hmm. where these people are lined up for special treatment. But one woman on it had a facial problem, cancer. Her face was turned this way. She couldn't breathe, connect with her windpipe. So here was this big line, and she's in the middle of it. And somebody told them, the ones at the top about it, they went back and picked her up and put her to the front of the line. Mm. Now that's human nature at its best, it's showing compassion for others. Right. And that's religion. Yeah. It's in harmony with religion. Yes. So that's why I say immediate is that the harvest is ripe for them to do something to promote peace in the world, an absence of war and violence, respect for one another.
Yes, and I agree, and I think apropos again what you were saying about Al Jazeera as a target, or even Putin's Russia Today, where some of our best broadcasters have gone to be able to do their work. They couldn't do it in this country under the present circumstances. That's why I went to Norway to make films, because I couldn't do what I wanted to do here. But we don't know where the answer is going to come from to continue what you began with challenge one, you might say. It could come from any direction, and I can share with you a story that I told to Jesse Jackson at a function down in LA just recently. I told him, you know, some of the most powerful evangelical, because I grew up a fundamentalist, leaders in America have had their shot at converting me back to evangelical fundamentalism, and none of it took. But it took a Jew, our friend Rabbi Levine here, and it took a Muslim, a friend of mine from Baghdad, who took on Saddam Hussein, literally with a number of his friends before Bush invaded there, to teach me to appreciate Christ. Yeah. And Jesse Jackson just said, wow. So we don't know where the doors are going and windows are going to open for us.
Lights went over, and he touched some young Japanese kids and changed their lives, changed the policy of Japan.
Yes.
So you never know what's going to happen. So, well, anyway, I want to thank you for this opportunity to
Thank
share
you.
with you.
Thank you so much.
Wish you good luck.
Yes.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Was your camera on the whole time? Did
Yeah,
you
I got
record?
like 26 minutes here.
Oh, good.
I stopped it when Pat came in. And
Yeah. Because if that red light isn't on, it's not recording, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, no. Don McEwen,
Don
come on
McEwen.
with his words. The story I tell you before I go, I've had
Yeah.
2 services today, so I'm going to take a break.
Sure.
We're doing a program, and we took turns moderating. I was moderating. They need 2-minute introduction, question to the pastor, turn to the rabbi. He banged the table and said, "Stop this program." I nearly stopped my heart. I thought, did I offend the rabbi after all these years? I would turn off the lights in the studio. Rabbi said, "I can't hear my partners." And everybody relaxed a bit. Then he said, "There's a carpenter hammering back here. I can't hear them." And McEwen said right away, "Rabbi, it seems it's not the first time you and your people are in trouble with the carpenter." That really won't pick
Great
up.
story. Thanks
Well,
so
thank
much.
you very much. I'll
Yes.
see you. I'll talk to you tonight this evening.
Okay.
What's on tonight? I have dinner with Chin. Yeah.
Yes.
Anyhow, Neil, good to meet you.
Yeah, good to see
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thanks so
Thank you.
much. Well, apart from wiping out that one beautiful interview.
Yeah.